where strategy gaming meets good vibes. No stress, just critical moves. Welcome everybody to episode 9 of Critical Moves. Today we are going to be talking about our most anticipated games of 2025. I'm joined by Joe.
Hey everybody.
And Nuno.
Hello everyone.
Nuno, who would have thought we'd have made it to the end of the year, eh?
I never thought about it. Just an idea that came out of nowhere. So, an email, I guess a random email led to this. So, it's your fault.
Yeah, everything's always my fault. I've learnt that now.
You're the negative nanny.
Of course. And then we decided to expand the team with Tim and Shane and Mr. Clark Kent himself. Joe is with us today.
Yep, just random Reddit message from me.
And you just thought, this looks like it could be fun.
Yeah. I just thought, bunch of kids, full-time job. Let's do some more.
Bunch of kids, full-time job, millennial binge. What the hell? Stick another podcast on there.
Let's do it.
So here we are at the end of 2024. Hope everybody's had a good Christmas. Can I say Christmas, or is that being cancelled?
On this podcast, you can.
I can. Okay. So I hope everyone's had a good Christmas. Let's kick off our most anticipated games of 2025. Who wants to go first?
You.
I'm going to volunteer Nuno to go first.
Ah, damn it. Okay. I can go first. So the first game I think I'm mostly excited for 2025, which is weird because I played all of the games I'm going to talk about. So it feels very weird to realize that they're going to come out next year, but I have to bring Task Force Admiral because I think the game is finally nearing its release date. So it's a World War II naval combat. I would even dare say simulator because it's that detailed and that realistic, and it's being developed by a really small team. But the game is looking fantastic. They had a playtest a couple of months ago. I can't even remember if it was this year or last year, to be honest. But it was absolutely fantastic. The game looks incredible. The amount of detail it has is amazing. I don't think we've ever seen a naval combat war game done this realistically and this detail yet.
How does it compare to Sea Power that was released in November? Is it the same kind of game, different kind of game?
I don't know a lot about the details yet, so I couldn't tell you about that. We just played. When I say we, I mean myself and a bunch of other strategy-related website guys. It was like a non-Rails demo where you would just watch the thing run and look at the results and all that. So I don't know. To be honest, I don't know how it's going to play, but I suspect it's going to be similar, but in World War II. At least I hope so. But it appears to be that it's going to be a lot more detailed than Sea Power. I'm really excited for that.
So what game is it like that's already out? Just to give us an idea.
I don't know. I don't think you have a direct comparison, to be honest. That's why I'm so excited about it, because it's something really new, really fresh. Maybe, I'm trying to remember, I think it's called Victory at Sea. Maybe it could be similar to that, but I really don't know because it's super new. Oh, I know. I remember another game called War on the Sea. Came out 2021, I think, which is also a World War II naval war game in real time on the Pacific. But I think Task Force Admiral is shaping up to be a lot more detailed than that, and it's going to be way more focused on the carrier battles that took place in the Pacific. So I think if Shane was here, I think he's going to be super excited for that.
So what's your first game going to be? Who are you going to play first?
What do you mean?
What faction are you going to play first?
Oh, the Allies, of course. I mean, can you say that now? Am I gonna be cancelled for saying that? Should I say the Japanese?
No, you can say that.
Ah,
No,
okay.
no. You can say that. That's fine.
I want to play the winning faction.
There you go. So when
Well,
does
of
it come
course.
out? Do we know? Do we have an estimate?
I don't think it has a set release date because the game has been in development, in active development for the last years, and recently I got some notice about it, but I have to admit that I still haven't read it. So it said like on massive bold letters that those were exciting news. So I need to go back and read it. Maybe I'll do
So
it right now.
So it's an indie title, yeah?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but it's being published by Microprose, so I don't think if you can call that an indie title right now. But it's being developed by a small team. I know I interviewed the guy a couple like in 2023, I think, and you can see that he's super passionate about it. And it's a very small team. The guy even told me that he sold his house just to fund the project. Like he had another house, of course, so he didn't go homeless just to develop the game. But he told that story, and that was the moment that you could see. Okay, like this is something serious.
That's some dedication to invest all that money into a game which could be a flop. But I'm sure it won't be a flop. Sorry for saying that. I'm sure it'll be excellent.
Any game.
On the
could
subject
be.
of microprose, they have their fingers in all of the pies. It seems every time I see a non AAA strategy game that's coming out, microprose are behind it. What gives you
Microprose
that?
or Hooded Horse.
I was going to say Hooded Horse too.
So are they championing the indie developer at the moment then?
I wouldn't say they're championing it, but they certainly made an impressive comeback because the company had been dead for 2 decades, right? So some new guys just bought the company or the rights for the company, I really don't know. And they've been hoarding up a lot of games, and for the most part, I think they have released like some really interesting titles. The better of which I think is Second Front, another World War II war game. I know, shocker.
So is Task Force Admiral a turn-based game, real-time game?
No, it's a real time. It's real time.
Real time.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
real time. And the most amazing thing is that just how much like this is a game that has been in development for I would say like at least 5 years. I can certainly say that, but it's so detailed. Like they're going to the utmost extreme to make sure that every small thing is simulated, and I think that's super exciting because okay, you got a couple of games that might be similar to this, but not to this amount of detail, and that's what I think is gonna be its selling point. And from what I see, like on social media, a lot of people are excited about it. They're always commenting on the post. They have a lot of likes, so I think they're gonna be massively successful, and I certainly hope so because there's a clear love for history here.
But it sounds a lot like Sea Power, just in a different era.
And I'm okay with that. I love that. I don't mind that.
Okay, let's move on, and Joe can tell us about the first game that he's looking forward to next year. I say next year; it's only 4 days away.
Yeah, we're getting there. My first pick is Ascent of Ashes. It is a colony building strategy game built by some RimWorld modders that came up with one of the most used mods in RimWorld, and they decided to come up with a game, and this one looks a lot like RimWorld when you look at it. It's almost RimWorld with a little bit of tactical strategy a la Door Kickers, and then you combine that with the Paradox game Surviving the Aftermath. And I don't know if you guys played, what's the zombie game? I can't remember the zombie survival game, but there's another zombie survival game it kind of reminds me of. But it's like kind of a weird amalgamation of all of those games. and it really looks interesting to me. It's all procedurally generated, and there's a lot of exploration. You're going to be managing a base, building up that base, exploring, looking for other survivors. It looks like there might be some diplomacy dealing with other survivors, and all of that will be randomly generated each time. And it really looks like an interesting experience that I cannot wait to try.
It sounds a little bit like Infection-Free Zone.
Yes, I could see that.
Seen that one, yeah.
I have seen Infection-Free Zone. The thing about Infection-Free Zone is it's got that really unique zip code feature where it starts from your own location. But I think this one might have different graphics, though. This has got really similar to RimWorld graphics to me, but just maybe slightly more detailed. It's hard to tell from here. I really like the look of the combat, though. The combat was really tactically oriented. A lot of going for cover, getting the right angles, and then you combine that with actually exploring, surviving an apocalypse, and all of the navigating there. It really looks quite interesting to me. I can't wait to try it.
The art style looks very much like a game called Dustfront, which is an RTS game, it's been in development for about 10 years. I don't know whether you've seen that one.
I have not seen that.
That would have been on my list, but the developer, it's a solo project, and I don't think it's going to be released in 2025. But it just looks like such a super interesting RTS title, mixed with some grand strategy elements. But Ascent of Ashes looks like it could be right up my street.
Yeah, it looks really good. It was supposed to come out in the middle of November, but they pushed it back, and that's the only thing that worries me is there's no date as to what they're pushing it back towards, but I'm hopeful it'll be a 2025 release, early 2025, hopefully, because I want to get my hands on it.
So were they honest about their reasons for pushing it back? Because we see this a lot with game releases being pushed back, and we seem to be getting into a situation now where developers are being quite truthful and transparent about the reasons for these things being delayed, rather than saying some bullshit. They actually come out and they tell the truth. Have they given reasons for it to be delayed at all?
From what I'm
Go ahead.
Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, what I was reading here is that they ported the game to Godot, a new engine, so maybe that's why it got delayed. At least that's what an update. Oh, maybe I think this is an older update, but still, like porting a game to an entire new engine is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
That's a huge decision.
Oh yes, I know a game made by a guy called Ezra Sidram, but I can't remember the name of the game that has been ported a number of times, and the game just keeps getting delayed. Like it started being made on XNA, I think that's how it's called. Like it was something to develop games for the Xbox 360. So yeah, imagine that.
It's a huge decision to port games when they're being developed from one engine to another. That must have been some call that they've made there. Bold, really. Hopefully it pays off, so it's certainly one to look out for. Shall I tell you about my first pick?
Do it.
Go ahead.
Okay. The Last General. Now, I know that Nuno has spoken to the developer of The Last General, as have I. And I'm a huge RTS fan. RTS is really my favourite kind of games, and this is a real-time strategy game, but just so different to what we normally have with the very micro-orientated. In The Last General, it's a procedurally generated war zone, a self-contained island with dozens of towns and cities included, and the developer says that because it's procedurally generated, there could be billions of battlefields that you could use here, some of them the size of small countries. It just looks like it would be a really, really interesting game because it's taking the view away from what we expect with games like Command and Conquer Red Alert and your typical RTS, and giving you a huge a huge macro view of things, and you're making decisions as a general rather than as a GI.
But don't you think that by having randomly generated islands, it might detract a bit from the experience? Because I'm of the opinion that I would rather have fewer maps, but they being customly built for that game or to provide me a challenge, rather than just like have an algorithm spit out something that might be amazing one time and might suck the next. So I always find it hard. I think it works for some games, but strategy, I don't know. I'm always a bit worried about that.
We'll have to ask him whether there will be custom built maps as well, or whether it's all procedurally generated. And when we talk about this macro view of things, you essentially draw strategic arrows on the map to direct your combined arms troops towards the enemy, and things like logistics, supply lines are really, really important to this. You're not so worried about the individual man built from your individual barracks going out and fight. You're looking at things from a significant height with significant control.
Yeah, but that also means that you need to have a really good AI to manage all the small moving parts, right? Because if you're giving directives, you are not supposed to be controlling small units. So I'm always a bit worried about that, because most of these games really don't have RTS games are not famous for having great artificial intelligence.
So you get to make these decisions, you point your arrows, and then do you get to watch the little guys go do their thing?
Yeah. So on the subject of AI, the game is reported to have 3 different layers of AI. You have the general AI, which will handle the objectives. Tactical AI takes care of troop movements and resource management, and the individual AI governs the specific unit behaviors. So I know you're right, Nuno, when you say about the AI in RTS games isn't always brilliant or the most innovative or the most challenging. But I think with this having so many different layers, so many different levels of control, it may surprise you. Hopefully it surprises all of us.
But don't you think that by doing that, you might just be playing a game of numbers? Because if you're just moving like massive units around or doom stacks around, you might be losing some of that interesting tactical control you might have. So I'm always a bit wary about this kind of gameplay loops, just because you either have a really good AI or you give player the opportunity to tweak those tactical battles.
I hear what you're saying, but what the developer has said about this is that the game will emphasize decision making over actions per minute. So I think that's really, really important. I didn't like games like StarCraft, which might surprise you because I do love RTS games, because there seemed to be a particular methodology of clicking your mouse, clicking your keyboard in a particular order, a particular time in order to be successful, rather than sitting back and having to think about what are your decisions, how are you going to implement them, and then seeing those plans come to fruition.
You know, this is a little, maybe it's a stretch, but it reminds me a lot of my favorite series is the Football Manager games. You make a tactic in the Football Manager games, and it is numbers, really. I mean, it's spreadsheets, but they've got a visual display, and you watch your tactics, and then you make choices, and the AI makes choices and responds. It's not, I mean, obviously one's a football match and the other one's a war zone, but it really is kind of the same thing. In Football Manager, you're a manager, and this game, you're a general, and you lay out your tactic, and then the AI goes out and does it. And that, to me, that sounds really interesting. This one sounds interesting to me because I love the idea that I'm also not let me click 1,000 times and during the middle of a game. I like to lay out a plan and then watch my little guys do it.
Too old for that kind of thing now, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I think that what we can expect to see from this is that you will not have control over the individual units. So you will take your combined arms groups, which you can determine the elements which go into those particular groups, and you will give them their orders, and then they will set off to attempt to complete those objectives. And this is such a different approach to what we expect. I mean, if you look at games like Tempest Rising, which is going to be coming out next year as well, it's a Command and Conquer clone, and I think we've seen so many CNC clones recently and in development. With this game, with The Last General, they've thought about doing something different, and that needs to be celebrated and applauded. So it's really high on my list, but it won't be released until at least September. So hopefully Mr. Developer can listen to this, and he can give us some feedback on what he's planning. Maybe he'll come and speak to us one day.
I'm sure he would be welcome here, since we already talked with him. But yeah, I think the game is looking great, and that's why I also reached out to him, because I remember seeing it on a YouTube video ad. No, I mean, like, I never heard about this, and this looks interesting because it had Panzer Force in a modern setting with like Vietnam era soldier units. I was like, yeah, let's see what this is all about. And I think the game has promise, has a lot of promise. I think just as long as the randomly generated stuff works out great, and it has a good generation system, and as long as the tactical side of things happen somewhat realistically and they make sense, as long as you don't just send your troops and they just move on a straight line or do exactly what you're told and they don't have any agency. As long as that's plausible, they act plausibly. I think The Last General has a lot of promise as well.
I quite agree. Nuno, let's move on to your second pick.
Oh, my second pick is one I'm sure you guys have heard quite enough already, which is Burden of Command, and it's coming out soon. It's a World War II leadership simulator, I guess, turn-based war game as well, and I've been excited about it since I first saw it, and again, like 5 or 7 years ago. And we finally got our hands on it, and I think the demo is still available if you guys want to give it a go. At the tail end of 2024, and it was fantastic, and I really have high hopes for what this might turn out to be. The fact that there's a lot of historical attention, the fact that the guy who's doing this clearly loves the subject, and that it's basically turn-based brothers in arms. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Didn't we talk about this one on a previous episode? My memory is hazy because of my advanced years. But I'm sure you mentioned about the...
Are you going to say that I said the game is like a book in video game form? Because I saw that floating around.
I'm sure you mentioned something about the emotional connection, because is it not in the demo you start at training camp with the same guys that you go on to lead, almost like Band of Brothers?
It's exactly like Band of Brothers. It is Band of Brothers, but turn-based. And you start at camp, at officers training, and you're leading your unit, and you go with them throughout the war. I think you start in North Africa, and then you move on, and I think you end up in 1945. And I'm just curious to see the progression of the game. How is the progression going to work? Because since this was a demo, we didn't actually have a great look at that. So I'm really curious to see how's that going to play out. and I think the game is gonna be a success within the wargaming community, just because of how it tries to portray history, and I think we're missing that at the moment.
I'll be curious because it does look very story based. I'll be curious what kind of replayability does it have? Like, is it an on rails experience, or is it something where you can get out in the weeds? I'll be interested to see.
I think
where
it's
that
gonna
ends
to
up.
depend a lot on your choices. Hopefully, I mean that's my hope, at least, that your experience is gonna be based on the choices you make, because like this is like a double-edged sword. Is that the game interrupts you a lot, asking you for choices, and like even in the middle of the battle, you're like, oh, what you gonna do now? There's a Sherman tank burning when the guys are under fire. Are you gonna risk your men and go save that Sherman crew, or are you just going to ignore it and rush to the objective because that's what your superiors told? There's a lot of this, and I'm curious to see what are the consequences of this, because at the moment we didn't have that. So you're just inside that mission, and whatever you do doesn't extrapolate to anything else. So yeah, I think if the game's gonna be replayable, it's gonna be because of your decision making. But I think the missions are always going to be the same. But don't quote me on that, because I'm not sure.
Now, harking back to last Friday, I'm sure your decisions would be entirely moral, wouldn't they?
Oh, I'm sure they will. But in this time, you can only play as an American. So
So
I
what are
would
you
say-
what are you trying to say about our American cousins?
I think they have. I don't think it's controversial to say that the Americans had the moral superiority. The Americans are the allies. Had the moral superiority in World War II. I mean, if this is a controversial opinion, then the war was truly lost. But I'm
think you're
sure
good on that one.
I'm sure somewhere, somehow, someone is gonna be really upset about this. But hey, I mean, you have the right to be stupid. So who am I? Who am I to call you out on your takes?
Everybody has that right.
Of course.
Joe, what's your second choice?
Okay, I have a list that it's been hard for me to pare it all down, but there's one game that is some will call it a stretch to be a strategy game, but when I go looking for it on Steam, it's under strategy, so that works for me. And this one is Hollywood Animal. It is it's a tycoon strategy game that is almost like someone tried to make the movies. Did any of you guys play the movies game back a long time ago?
As a kid. Yeah, I have.
I
A lot,
loved that
actually.
game. Yes, such a fun game. And
Yeah,
so really,
I was
yeah, they were trying to put their own unique spin on that formula. And what they've come up with is a totally different art design, but they're still doing the build up your own studio, pick movies, hire actors, hire staff, all of that. But then there's all these dilemmas that pop up. Like your movie, your head actor can be like, I'm not going to finish the movie unless you raise my salary. And then you can do some research on him and find out he has a pill problem. And then you have to decide, am I going to give him the money, or will I say, hey, I'll tell everyone about your pill problem? And so it almost turns into a mafia gangster style story game, as well as having this whole movie making aspect.
But is the game gonna have the same thing that the movies had, which was like a direct your own movie kind of mini game? Because I remember that in the movies you could research like scenes. I think it was that, like my memory is failing me now. But I think you could just like keep going, and now you have a scene where your actor does this, and then it does that, and then you keep adding more scenes, and you can create a really interesting movie. Is this gonna have that or not?
So, I played the demo. The demo did not get into, as far as I know, because even when you play the movies, you don't get into the make your own movies until you get to a certain part of it, right? When you get to that certain level, you also find that maybe you can make your own, create your own custom movies and whatnot. I did not see that in the demo. When I've looked, I haven't seen. I'm sure maybe one of our listeners will be able to explain fully whether they'll be able to do that. But I almost think, unfortunately, you can't, which would be such a bummer to me because that was one of the things that really gave the movies game so much lasting staying power was people being able to make their own movies. You could go find people still making their own movies now. Someone just made a Terminator movie I found a couple years ago. That was actually not terrible.
So this is more of a city of gangsters kind of game, like a tycoon. So you're basically like the head of the studio and not necessarily the director, or you're like a Hollywood producer.
Yeah, it does feel that way to me, unfortunately. I'm still holding out hope that that's there, and I just haven't found that part of it yet, because like I said, the demo doesn't go that far. But the game comes out in January, so we will know soon.
Oh, I was saying that this might be some kind of mafia movie, but I'm looking at a screenshot of it that says, select an operation, and what you have is threat, beating, kidnapping, or killing. So I would say, yeah, this is very much a mafia in Hollywood. But yeah, I mean, it's called Hollywood Animal, right? So.
Yeah. And I used to like this old Mafia game too, so it sort of combines this old gangsters game I liked that was a tycoon and my movies game I liked, so I'm looking forward to some nostalgia come January.
Oh, this looks super cool. I haven't heard about it, but it sounds right up my alley. I think I'm gonna love that. Al, you're too quiet. Don't you like Hollywood?
I do like Hollywood, yes. But I don't really have anything to add.
Okay, so if you don't have anything to add, Al, why don't you tell us about your game?
My next pick is a game called Kaiserpunk, which is not to be confused with Frostpunk. Kaiserpunk is a game set in an alternative 20th century where World War I never ended. And it's a interesting combination of city builder and grand strategy. So you can build up your cities, but then you can go out and you can fight battles as well on the map of Europe. And I just thought, we've seen city builders, we've seen grand strategy games, but amalgamating them in a way where the transition is seamless just really stood out to me as something which was quite interesting and not really done before.
But how is the city building aspect going to relate to the grand strategy aspect of it? Because they seem like two very different scales.
They do, but apparently there is quite a good link there, because you need to make sure that your cities are built in such a way as they can supply your armies. So things like research new technologies, making sure that your troops are supplied to be able to go out and fight. Now, they say they're lacking supplies, so if you do not have the infrastructure in place in your cities, your armies, when they go out to try and fight, get significant, brutal battle penalties, because they simply don't have the ability to fight without the infrastructure behind them.
Are you going to have the possibility of commanding your troops in battle in here, or that's like something abstract, like Paradox games? Because I was looking at the trailer of it, and there seems to be some emphasis on warfare, but I don't see any gameplay of that.
I don't think that we're going to see any kind of Total War transition to real-time battles. I think it is more of a civilization style. You put your army against another army and see who's victorious. But I don't think that the actual battles is the main thrust here. It's the ability or the requirement for you to make sure that your settlements in your cities are built in such a way so that they can support your armies when they're on campaign. And you can use them to use your armies to take over other regions and then have more settlements. I'd like to see some sort of settlement specialisms in there as well. So I think that would be quite interesting.
I was looking at the
Yeah,
Steam
because
page, and it looks like I see some troops killing each other and charging through a city. So I'm not giving up hope that there won't be some small battle form of it. I see something in that.
That'd be
yeah,
quite interesting, wouldn't it? If you had a city builder, a grand strategy game, and then RTS on top. But maybe that might be a bit of a stretch. I think that
Maybe they
no one's
wouldn't
ever
do
done that
any of
before,
them
have
well.
they? No, and that's always the risk, isn't it? If you do too much and you ultimately fail. Whereas if the focus is on a solid city builder, and then the grand strategy is supported by the city builder, I think that's got real potential.
I'm curious to see how the game is going to work around the idea that World War One never ended. So is that just the starting point, or like is the war ongoing when you start playing the game, and you have to deal with that, or just it's just a basic idea? Okay, the war never ended, so I don't know, because I know there was a demo out. I played the first.
It was in
15
June, wasn't
minutes
it, the
of
demo?
Yeah, I guess so, but I never got around to play it a lot because I just had other stuff to do. And but I was interested in the game. And from what I saw, I don't think that the fact that it's set on a timeline where the World War One never ended had a lot of impact on it. And I was just a bit disappointed with the lack of, at least from when I played it, that didn't seem to have that RTS aspect of it, because the trailer made it seem like it. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that the setting is just World War One, rather than it being a continuation of history. It's an alternate history, and I know that lots of games do this alternate history. We look back to the 90s. Red Alert did it with World War Two. Now, of course, this isn't an RTS as far as I can tell, but that's perhaps just a case of the types of
Are you
units you have
telling
in
me
there.
that Red Alert isn't an historical title?
Oh my god, I know, shock horror, mind blown. But I think that the setting just influences the type of units that will be available. So you'll have artillery, you'll have battalions of infantry, artillery, tanks. There's naval battles as well, which I think's really important. We don't see that as often as what we should in these kind of games. And then you'll have air squadrons of fighters and bombers as well. And I'm sure I've seen some blimps in there as well. Not Kirov airships from Red Alert 2, but Zeppelins.
I love those.
Everybody loves a Kirov, don't they?
It's a shame you don't have those Red Alert 2, where I think they would drop bombs, right? Which makes total sense, in a setting where you can time travel. You just have like slow moving blimps that drop bombs. Just why not? Oh man, I love Red Alert.
It was perfect. It was completely perfect.
Yeah.
Nuno, what's your next title?
You could say that it's my most anticipated title of 2025, and it's.
Well, I should hope
be,
so, since you've left it to the last.
Yeah, it's going to be Broken Arrow, which is an RTS being developed by Slytherin. I should say being published by Slytherin and being developed by Balalaika Studios. I think that's the name. It's very similar to other games I'm sure you guys know about, like the Fusion Systems War Game series of titles, or Warno, that came out this year. Very, very similar. However, it does something that I was really looking forward to, that the Fusion System never did, which was they added a lot of detail into the infantry combat. Because in those other titles, like infantry is just another unit that really doesn't do much other than garrison buildings. And here they are a very important piece of your battlefield strategy, and I love that. And besides, the game looks amazing.
I guess infantry tends to just be cannon fodder in these kind of games, doesn't it? It's just a stepping stone to getting your tanks out there. So it'd be very interesting to see infantry take a more prominent role in an RTS.
Yeah, it is, and it's a shame because if Ukraine show us something, not that I want to go into real life politics, but is that if Ukraine show us something, is that infantry still has a very large role to play on the modern battlefield, and the tank. Yeah, you could see something faltering there for a moment. I even remember reading some articles about the death of the tank. Yeah.
So, have you played this game?
Yeah, I have. Oh no! I guess I'm not under NDA anymore because yeah, because I just remember there's an open beta. There was an open beta going around on it, and yeah, I have played the game probably a year ago, prior to us recording that, and I can assure you that the game, like the infantry aspect of the game, is much more pronounced than those other titles. Because they did two very interesting things. It was that they make the cities really big. So you're mainly fighting on urban terrain. So each building matters. Instead of being like, okay, your infantry is occupying a clump of buildings, it's what happened in the war game series and Warno. Here you're fighting across individual streets, individual buildings, and the infantry you have a lot more control over your infantry, so you just don't move them around. You can select which weapons they can use and how to better employ them. So they're not cannon fodder anymore. They do what they're supposed to do, which is fight street to street, house to house, set up ambushes. And the fact that the maps are huge and the cities are really massive means that your tanks need to go there to capture them. And they become vulnerable because that's where infantry thrives.
I suppose that's probably why the infantry is so much more important in this game compared to its peers, is because of that urban setting. You can't really use a tank to capture a building. You just use a tank to blow up a building, whereas in order to kick the door in and clear the building, you've got to send in the infantry.
Yeah, you do. But I think that's also because like the war game series of titles were designed having in mind you could say Cold War doctrines, like so just like massive waves of tanks fighting against each other. And Broken Arrow is set on our current day, so they have a different perspective of it. And the fact that they decided that this was the right way to go really sold me on the game. And having played it, I think they did a great job. I think the game is gonna be, if you're looking for like Warno or War game, but smaller. I wouldn't say smaller scale because that's not true, but more granular kind of controls and unit placement and have an overall control over your troops. I think this is gonna be the title for you.
So what's the setting? Is it modern day, and is there a campaign as well?
I think there's gonna be a campaign, but not a lot of details have been announced yet. But I have played the first mission, and it's really cool. So you basically start with at the edge of a city. You need to go in, make sure you capture that first part of the town. Then you need to repel the enemies coming from across the river. And what you need to do after is that you just need to take your troops to the other side of the river. And this means that you start to play around with boats, ships, helicopters, airplanes. It's really good.
I was just looking at the Steam page, and it says that it's America and Russia are the two factions, and then there's sub-factions within each, which sounds interesting to me, the sub-faction part. I'd be interested to read about those.
Yeah, I think the sub-factions are going to be like the divisions of each country. So you might have like a special Spetsnaz kind of unit that has its specialities, and then you have like the U.S. Army might have some kind of armored unit. I think it's more on that vein. But what I'm most interested about, because I'm not a multiplayer kind of guy, so I don't play this kind of games online but since I want to try it out, I'm gonna have to play the multiplayer beta. I'm really excited for the campaign. or for the skirmish against the AI, because I think the game is shaping up to be probably the best title of its kind, I would say. I think I'm pretty confident saying that. I think it's gonna beat War No and War Game, hands down. I'm calling this right now, boys. Quote me later.
Broken Arrow was actually just narrowly missed out on my list. When is it due to be released?
Oh, sometime in 2025, because it was supposed to come out late. It was supposed to come out, I think this is November, December, but they just postponed it, and I really don't know why. I think it was just for some bug fixing and all that, but I think the game is mostly finished.
So we don't have Q1, Q2. There's nothing more specific than just 2025.
No, it just says 2025.
Not even on the Steam page?
Nope, I just looked.
Okay. Joe, fire away. Your third and final most anticipated game of 2025.
Okay, I just cannot decide. Typical American, I want it all. I want it now. So I'm going to talk about two games. I'm just going to do whatever I want. Guns blazing. Let's do this. My two games are Noble's Life's Kingdom Reborn and Kingmakers. Okay, now both of these games don't have necessarily a ton out. I have played some Noble Life. I got a hold of it. I did my best. Hey, I'm going to talk about your game. Send me your code. And I got it, but there just wasn't enough time. So I'd love to talk about it again later. But I really liked what I did play. It's almost like a kingdom simulator. Like you're in charge of a barony, and your barony gets sacked by the British, and you're French, of course. And then you've got to make the decisions that will bring it back, basically. And you've got to see, it's one of those games where you're not the one necessarily always doing those actions. You tell people to do those actions, and they come back to you, and you see how it goes. There is some combat in it, but the combat's not even implemented yet, with the build that I got. But based on how it looks, the combat does look like it would be interesting. And the one thing I did get to do is they laid out a scenario, and then I had to lay out almost like chess pieces to say where I wanted my various troops to attack, and then I got to watch the battle play out rather than being a part of it. And then we won. I went to my castle, and I started giving out orders for what I wanted to happen. And it seemed really interesting. I like the idea of this. I like kingdom simulators, so it seemed right up my alley.
So is it like a colony sim, like Manor Lords, or is it different to that?
It seems almost more hands-off than Manor Lords. I don't know exactly the way to explain it, but it really did remind me of that mobile game where you made decisions and then you lost points. I can't remember what that was called, but they did a Game of Thrones one too. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? We might have to cut this.
No.
We might have to cut this part where I'm like, you know what I'm talking about? You guys are like, no.
No, we're not cutting this. Absolutely not. All right, since you're an American,
Reigns.
Let's have it all.
It's Reigns.
Reigns,
was it Raid Legend or something like that?
No, it's almost like Reigns, which is basically a card game where you make decisions and you have to deal with the consequences of your decisions. And if things go poorly enough, you die and your kingdom fails. And so that's the vibe I get from this game. It's not quite as granular. It's more large scale. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Okay, tell us your second cheat game.
And my second game is Kingmakers, which there's almost nothing out about this game. It looks like Bannerlord. You guys know Mount & Blade Bannerlord? This game that has so much hype on it. It's one of the only games like it. That's why people love it, because there's nothing else. They're like, I want to lead an army into battle and I want to control a kingdom. Well, you have one option. Well, two options if you want to go back 20 years and play original Mount & Blade. But Now Kingmakers, it looks like they're trying to do that again, but their stick they do with this one is they're like, hey, what if you went back in time and you've got a car and guns and you're just a random dude part of a battle with guns. And I'm really go ahead.
It's a mix between a strategy title and like a third-person shooter, right?
Yeah.
I saw this a couple of I think months ago. Yeah, this is gonna be fucking fantastic. It's just looks so incredibly stupid that just looks fun. Looks like a video game.
It reminded me of The Evil Dead.
Yeah, good point. I could see
just
that.
like The Evil Dead. This is my boomstick. Is that how it goes?
I don't remember, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Where he's just like, oh yeah, and he pulls out his chainsaw. It's that sort of deal. Yeah,
chainsaw attached to his hand.
Yeah. No, to me it's like the strategy version of Goat Simulator, where it's just so ridiculous, but how could it not be fun? I'm here for it. I want to play it so bad.
I think I could convince a couple of Gen Z guys that this was actually based on his own real history. How was the Battle of Agincourt? And then like a massive military helicopter goes around just firing hellfire missiles at everyone. No, this is how it was.
Look, if you pick the right part of America, you definitely could convince somebody.
Oh my god! Yeah, this looks really good. Yeah, I didn't have it on my wish list, but this is like a day one buy for me.
Oh, me too.
And you all, old man, he probably fought on some of the 100 Years' Wars battles himself as a longbowman.
He's offended.
What game?
I fought at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, but we'll save that for another episode later on in 2025. So the final game I want to talk about is one which is very close to my heart. It's Sanctuary Shattered Sun. Now, if it wasn't for this game, I probably wouldn't be here. It was Sanctuary which got me back into building websites, which got me into making rtshq.net, which caused me to contact Nuno because I thought his blog was semi-reasonable, which caused the start of Critical Moves. So if you're listening to this, you've got Sanctuary Shattered Sun to thank for us all being here.
It's just interesting how you only get two types of interactions online. You either get hate mail or someone saying that they really like your blog and so let's do a podcast. Interesting.
I never
stuff to think about.
I never said I really like your blog. I said it was kind of okay. Anyway, have you heard of this game?
I have. Yes, I have.
Joe's shaking his head. So, Chris Taylor, who is a legend amongst RTS fans, he's the guy who made Total Annihilation and the Supreme Commander games. He said that Sanctuary Shattered Sun was the spiritual successor to the games they made at Gas Powered Games, which for what is a small indie developer was incredibly high praise. To have somebody with such a legacy say that about your title is just absolutely fantastic. And I was just really sucked in. Supreme Commander is one of the games that I have dumped thousands of hours into. It was released in 2007, so 18 years ago. And it would appear that 18 years later, we could be on the cusp of getting a new version of this. So Sanctuary Shattered Sun is set on a Dyson sphere, which was built around our sun, and I think it's in 2,700 and something, so years into the future. Three factions are fighting for control of this megastructure which harbours all of human life. Have you played Supreme Commander in the past, Joe?
Yeah, I have.
So you'll be aware of the strategic zoom, so you can go from this godlike view of the battlefield and zoom all the way in to be able to see up close and personal your units duke it out. Sanctuary does that. It has a lot of the mechanics that you expect from a spiritual successor to Supreme Commander, but it's dialed up to 1,000. Some of the mechanics that they've put in there in terms of some of the super weapons, you can drop bombs which will smash holes in the map. You've got an incredibly novel feature which I thought was just incredible, was the ability to freeze the seas. So you could have a situation where you have your naval ships floating around, you've got subs under the water, and then the sea gets frozen, the ships can't move, and tanks can suddenly roll right across the ocean to attack your base. You thought you were safe, and then suddenly the sea gets frozen and the tanks are rolling towards you.
Now, that's a weather effect? That's not something you triggered yourself, right?
It is something which would be triggered, because what they're saying is, because this is an artificial construct, there's particular weather control stations or similar, or coolant systems or whatever, which you can destroy, which will change the map, change the dynamics of an entire battlefield.
Don't forget to mention that you can make massive holes on the Dyson field. I think you said you can destroy the map, but let's make that clear that you can really destroy the location where the game is played. And I really hope they just go wild with it and they just let you destroy everything.
Yeah,
I hope
absolutely.
it's not like. Is it? Do you know if that's preset? So oh, okay, you destroy this section of the map, or can you just destroy any section?
At the moment, it's a scripted feature, so there's only certain parts of the map which can be destroyed. But with a successful Kickstarter, that could become something where you can just decide where you are going to destroy the map. Now, you could use it to take out the base, or you could use it to block your enemy from attacking your base, or you could use it to create choke points, redirect enemies towards a different area of the map. But what Nuno describes there, I perhaps didn't do it justice when I said you can blow holes in the map. You fire this super weapon, it impacts, and everything which you can see suddenly falls into the Dyson sphere and into the sun below. Water falls, units fall, buildings fall, everything just disappears. And the level of destruction that you've seen is something which I've never seen before. Some people compare it to games like Planetary Annihilation, but this is on just a different scale altogether.
Wait, roll back a bit. Do you say the water also falls? So say you have your fluid and you make a hole on the middle of the ocean. Does it get drained like it was a bathtub? Like it just goes there?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Sounds
In
like this
theory.
would be crazy in multiplayer. Like you literally know, you have no idea what could happen.
Absolutely, and this is only one of the super weapons which has been released or showcased so far. There's 3 factions, each will have their own particular super weapon. Now, whether they can all blow holes in the map or whether that's specific to one particular faction, who knows? There's lots that we don't know about the game, but from what I've seen and what I've played so far, it was like playing Supreme Commander all over again. Just the scale was just ironically out of this world. So you're right about multiplayer being really, really important, and it looks like it'd be so much fun. But the aim for the game is for it to have a full, comprehensive, narrative-driven campaign mode to go alongside the skirmish mode and the multiplayer experience. The campaign is going to follow each of the 3 factions, each with its own story arc, which will, as we progress through the campaign, reveal more about the backstory of how Sanctuary came to be. There's so much work going into this. I think it deserves everybody's attention. If you've ever played Supreme Commander, you need to stick this on your wish list, and you need to stick it on your wish list now. So, pause, go ahead and do that.
Done.
Shameless plug alert.
Sorry. Yeah, I apologise about the shameless plug, but tough.
Yeah, but the game looks really good. Looks really cool. It is. It was also in one of my, I would say, top 10 most games I'm looking forward to in 2025, because I never really played a lot of Supreme Commander, but I was always very interested in playing it. But just for some reason, I just never got around to give it a go. But
Same
yeah,
here.
it looks fantastic.
Go and play it now. The game still holds up now, even 18 years later. And with FAF, with Forge Alliance Forever, which is a multiplayer client, there's still a huge community. It's still a really, really great game to play. Not so much Supreme Commander 2, which I think falls into that category of great game but bad sequel, which I think we see that in movies as well a lot. But it is an absolutely cracking experience still. So go and play it. 18 years later.
I'm putting that on my wish list for 2025. Go bucket list, I should say, to play Supreme Commander.
Me too.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us for this. It's always appreciated when we have people listening to us drone on about computer games. If you've enjoyed the episode, please share it with someone else. That's the best way to get the message out about Critical Moves. And you can also visit criticalmovespodcast.com for all the ways to get involved. Come and visit us on our Discord and tell us what games you're looking forward to in 2025, because I'm sure we've missed dozens of them. Thanks as always. Take it easy, and wishing everybody a Happy New Year.
See you, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody.